Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Administrative Order. In this section, dear friends, we're covering Part 3, Building the World Order of Baha'u'llah. At a time when forces of destruction are sweeping the surface of the earth, plunging the whole of the human race into a state of chaos and dismay and uprooting its time-honored institutions, the comparatively small community of the Most Great Name, consisting of men and women from all walks of life, young and old, rich and poor, literate and illiterate, armed with the invincible power of faith, strengthened by the unfailing support and confirmations of the Lord of hosts, and confident of ultimate victory, are engaged in erecting the framework of new institutions embracing the whole planet and designed to evolve in the fullness of time into a new world order to be established in the name of Baha'u'llah. This world order, which is destined to come into being in the future, in the plenitude of its glory and the establishment of which will signalize at once the emergence of the Baha'i Commonwealth, the hoisting of the banner of the Most Great Peace, and the advent of the Kingdom of God on earth, is today growing in its embryonic form and is referred to as the administrative order. This administrative order has been systematically developing within the Baha'i community since the inception of the formative age. His Holiness Abdul Baha has left to posterity his will and testament, which may be regarded as the child of the covenant and the charter of the New World Order. In it, he has delineated the features of the administrative order, laid down its principles, defined its functions, and called on the Baha'is to begin the task of erecting its institutions. Another significant series of tablets, 14 in all, addressed by Abdul Baha to the American believers, the tablets of the divine plan, fulfill a major role in the propagation of the faith among all the nations and peoples of the world, and constitute the charter for teaching the cause of God throughout the planet. In these tablets, Abdul Baha exhorts Baha'is to detach themselves from earthly things, sanctify their souls from the dross of this world, arise in a spirit of love and unity, and travel far and wide to every corner of the globe for the advancement of the cause of God. In these tablets, he also names 120 countries, territories, and islands to which Baha'i teachers should proceed for the teaching of the message of Baha'u'llah and the establishment of his faith. These two documents together, with the Kitab Aqdas, Baha'u'llah's most holy book, regarded as the charter of future world civilization, and the Tablet of Carmel, revealed by Baha'u'llah in the vicinity of the cave of Elijah, the charter for building the world center of the faith, constitute the major instruments which are to guide the Baha'i institutions as well as in inspiring the believers in their common task of building a new world order for mankind. It was the beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi, who laid the foundations of the administrative order and reared its institutions. At first, he concentrated on teaching the believers how to build the local spiritual assemblies and how to work within these. For a period of no less than 15 years, he devoted his time to the arduous task of teaching the Baha'is the principles of Baha'i administration. He explained the function, the scope, and the ultimate purpose of local and national institutions. He fashioned the administrative order by laying the foundations of the local spiritual assemblies on a firm basis, and then erecting upon these the national spiritual assemblies, which today sustain and support the mighty edifice of Baha'u'llah's universal house of justice. At the time of the passing of the Master, the believers had certain somewhat crude ideas about the faith and were not sufficiently mature. There was not an adequate sense of community life among them. It was the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi who, through his eloquent translations of the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, through his own masterly writings, through his guidance and direction of the affairs of the local and national assemblies throughout the world, through his constant encouragement and perseverance over a period of more than 3 decades, patiently and effectively unveiled the faith of Baha'u'llah to their eyes. He placed in the right perspective everything that the faith possessed: its founders, its laws, its ordinances, its teachings, its principles, and its institutions. These were all placed, as in a jigsaw pattern, in their relative positions. He enabled the believers to acquire a new conception of community life, of unity and solidarity. In the heroic age of the faith, the believers were so attracted by Baha'u'llah that they did not pay much attention to anything else. They were in love with him and were completely intoxicated by the wine of his presence. But now was the time of the building of the new world order, and it was through the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi's endeavors and guidance that the vision of the Baha'is widened. They began to appreciate the faith in a new light, and many arose for the building up of local and national institutions throughout the world. During the first 15 years of the guardianship, no less than 8 national spiritual assemblies were formed, and 30 additional sovereign states were brought within the pale of the faith. Some other outstanding events during this period are as follows: passing of the greatest holy leaf sister of Abdul Baha in 1932, recognition of the independent status of the faith in Egypt, seizure of Baha'u'llah's house in Baghdad, which led to the submission of a petition to the League of Nations, whose resolution was to uphold the claim of the Baha'i community to that house, teaching exploits of Martha Root in her journeys 4 times around the globe, culminating in the enrollment in the faith of the first crowned head, Queen Marie of Romania, creation of the International Baha'i Bureau in Geneva in 1925, the implementation of the Ordinance of Baha'u'llah concerning the institution of the 19-day feast, growth of organized youth activities, enlargement of Baha'i endowments and properties in the Holy Land, United States, and Persia, acquisition of historic sites in Persia, and formation of international Baha'i archives. In the cradle of the faith, where during this period the followers of the Most Great Name were still oppressed by the authorities and were subjected to sporadic outbursts of persecution resulting in the martyrdom of many, the beloved guardian Shogh Effendi turned his attention to the institutions of the faith, which by then were functioning throughout the length and breadth of that land. He gave them a special task which assumes a great importance in the cause, namely the implementation of some of the laws of the Kitab Aqdas, the warp and woof of Baha'u'llah's world order. He directed the spiritual assemblies in Persia to begin the enforcement of these laws within the Baha'i community, laws which, although known to the believers in that land, had not previously been observed. In the course of his ministry, he elaborated a great deal on the application of these laws, elucidated many intricacies and details connected with them, urged the spiritual assemblies never to compromise when enforcing the laws, and counseled them to uphold the standard of justice and impartiality in all cases. Thus, he built up in this particular field a great reservoir of knowledge and experience which will be of great value in the future. In the United States of America, the scene of the building of the pattern of the administrative order, the institutions of the faith had grown and developed to a point where the Guardian was able, in 1937, to launch the first 7-year plan. An enterprise of great significance which opens the initial phase of the first epoch in the prosecution of the divine mandate conferred on the American believers by Abdul Baha, and marks a turning point in the history of the administrative order of the faith. By the time this plan had been triumphantly completed in 1944, coinciding with the worldwide celebrations of the centenary of the birth of the faith, the number of local spiritual assemblies in the United States had almost doubled. The number of localities in which Baha'is were residing had enormously increased, and the nucleus of the institutions of the faith had been established in every republic of Latin America. This tremendous achievement, together with the completion of the exterior ornamentation of the holiest house of worship in the Baha'i world, awakened the Baha'is of other lands to the significance of these events in the United States and opened their eyes to the pattern of systematic expansion and consolidation of the faith, which had developed as a direct consequence of this first historic plan initiated by the guardian of the cause of God and executed by the followers of Baha'u'llah in the cradle of the administrative order of the faith. Such a glorious triumph for the cause created an upsurge of eagerness and dedication, of confidence and enthusiasm in the hearts of the believers in other lands. They too longed to scale loftier heights of service in the cause of God. As each national assembly reached the point of readiness, the Guardian gave his approval and encouragement to the formulation of national plans mainly designed to increase the number and consolidate the institution of the local spiritual assemblies, and to multiply the Baha'i centers within their national boundaries and beyond. The first to turn to the Guardian for a plan was the British community, who were given a 6-year plan in 1944. Other plans followed within 2 to 3 years. Each had a certain duration and ended either in 1950, the 100th anniversary of the martyrdom of the Bab, or in 1953, the Holy Year, the centenary of the birth of Baha'u'llah's revelation in the Sia Chal of Tehran. Foremost among these was the second 7-year plan of the Baha'is of the United States of America, the duration of which marks the second phase of the initial epoch of the tablets of the divine plan. This plan, which incorporated some major international goals, including the establishment of local spiritual assemblies in 10 countries of Western Europe, the formation of 3 national assemblies in the Western Hemisphere, and the interior ornamentation of the Mashal Askar in the United States was successfully accomplished in 1953. Others were the Indian 4.5-year plan, followed by a 19-month plan, the Persian 45-month plan, the Australian 6-year plan, the Iraqi 3-year plan, the Egyptian 5-year plan, the German 5-year plan, the Canadian 5-year plan, and finally the second British 2-year plan, in which 6 national spiritual assemblies worked together for the establishment of the faith on the continent of Africa. This plan played a significant role in creating the pattern for future international cooperation and inter-assembly projects, a prelude to the launching of world-encircling plans throughout the planet. Apart from these plans, which had created an upsurge of activity among all the national Baha'i communities, and which had inspired many believers to arise as pioneers and settle in gold towns or in virgin territories, other important developments were taking place during this time, paving the way for the future unfoldment and rise of the administrative order of Baha'u'llah. Foremost among these were the appointment by the beloved guardian Shogh Effendi in 1951 of the first contingent of the Hands of the Cause of God, whose number was soon to be increased, the formation in the same year of the International Baha'i Council, destined to evolve through successive stages into the Universal House of Justice, the participation of Baha'i delegates in the non-governmental organizations of the United Nations, and the phenomenal growth of the faith in Africa, the first continent to witness entry into the faith in great numbers. These far-reaching achievements, together with the triumphant conclusion of all national plans, endowed the community of the Most Great Name with tremendous potentialities for the expansion and consolidation of the faith on a worldwide scale. The national communities had by then acquired the vision and the capacity to take part in the first international plan. The beloved guardian Shogh Effendi in 1953 launched this plan, known as the 10-Year World Crusade. This historic plan, referred to by the Guardian as the greatest spiritual crusade the world has ever witnessed, marks at once the opening of the third and the final phase of the initial epoch of the tablets of the divine plan, and the inception of the international Baha'i community, bringing together the 12 existing national assemblies of the Baha'i world for the purpose of implanting the banner of the faith in all remaining virgin territories of the globe, of multiplying the number of the local and national spiritual assemblies throughout the world, and of accomplishing many other goals specified in the plan. At the time of the announcement of the goals of this mighty crusade, the followers of Baha'u'llah in every land were staggered by the immensity of the tasks with which they were confronted. Soon, however, they witnessed with feelings of gratitude, awe, and wonder that in the first year of the plan alone, 100 virgin territories had been opened to the faith. This prodigious expansion of the cause in the initial phase of the plan, which inspired the army of Baha'i pioneers and teachers to rise to loftier heights of heroism and sacrifice, enabling them to win further victories for the cause and to accomplish all the major goals of the plan in the following years, can only be attributed to the spirit of loyalty and devotion with which the hands of the cause of God and their board members, the national and local assemblies, the pioneers and the teachers, one and all, turned to the beloved guardian Shogh Effendi, the guardian of the cause of God and the sign of God on earth. It was halfway through this plan, however, that the hand of God removed him suddenly from their midst and left the believers like orphans, grief stricken and helpless on their own. Although the beloved guardian Shogh Effendi had passed away, and in his wisdom had left no will, the covenant of Baha'u'llah remained unbroken. The believers rallied around the hands of the cause of God, the chief stewards of the embryonic world commonwealth of Baha'u'llah, who now assumed the function of guiding the Baha'i world. This task they achieved by following strictly the guidance and the instructions of Shogh Effendi, outlined in his 10-year crusade. This period of about 5 years, which stretches from the passing of Shogh Effendi in 1957 until the election of the Universal House of Justice in 1963, can be considered as the most challenging phase in the history of the formative age of the faith. This was a period in which the covenant of Baha'u'llah was fully and rigorously tested and found to be absolutely impregnable. For unlike the Universal House of Justice, the hands of the cause were not promised infallible guidance by Baha'u'llah. Yet, through their loyalty to him and by their steadfastness in his covenant, they guided the Baha'i world exactly on the lines delineated by Shogh Effendi in his writings and did not deviate one hair's breadth from the path shown by him. Unlike the leaders of former religions who introduced so many man-made ideas into the teachings of their prophets, the hands of the cause in this period of the custodianship of the faith of Baha'u'llah did not add even a dot of their own to the cause, nor did they introduce any innovations into the working of its institutions. Not only did they guide and assist the believers during this period of the crusade, which was brought to its triumphant conclusion by them in 1963 when the Baha'i community demonstrated on the occasion of the Jubilee celebration of the Declaration of Baha'u'llah its universality and its cohesive strength, but at the same time they handed over the cause of God, pure and unadulterated, to the elected body of the Universal House of Justice, upon whom Baha'u'llah has conferred infallibility and divine guidance. At this juncture, the faith had grown from being merely a few national communities in 1952 into what was now a vast international community scattered throughout the world with masses of people responding to the call of Baha'u'llah, recognizing his station and entering the cause in great numbers. The number of countries, territories, and islands open to the faith up to 1942 was 128. In 1963, it stood at 259. In 1952, there were just over 600 local spiritual assemblies. This number was raised to over 3,400. In 1953, there were 12 national spiritual assemblies in existence. In 1962, 56 national and regional assemblies whose members were the electors of the Universal House of Justice came into being. The number of localities in which Baha'is resided throughout the world rose from about 2,400 to over 11,000, and the number of languages into which Baha'i literature was translated increased from 89 to over 300. In many cases, the progress of the faith far exceeded the original goals set under the plan. It was during this period also that 3 Mashal Askars were built in the African, the Australian, and the European continents. 46 additional sites were acquired for future houses of worship, and 49 additional Hazrat al-Quds were obtained throughout the world. In the Holy Land, the process of building the world center of the faith, which originated from Baha'u'llah through the revelation of the Tablet of Carmel, and which was initiated by the hand of the center of his covenant through the building of the original mausoleum of the Bab, had during the ministry of the beloved guardian Shough Effendi gathered such momentum that towards the end of his earthly life, the glory of Carmel, foretold by the prophets of the past, became manifest. The superstructure of the shrine of the Bab, the Queen of Carmel, crowned in glowing gold, robed in shimmering white, girdled in emerald green, which enchanted every eye from air, sea, plain, and hill, had been majestically raised. In its vicinity, the monuments marking the resting places of the greatest holy leaf, the purest branch, and the mother and wife of Abdul Baha, respectively, destined to become the focal point of a series of buildings situated around an arc, which are to constitute the international administrative center of the faith, had been befittingly erected. The first in this series is the International Archives building, within whose walls the most precious relics of the central figures of the faith are preserved, had been constructed. The 9 terraces connecting the city of Haifa to the shrine of the Bab had been completed, and the gardens surrounding the shrine and the adjoining buildings had been developed and embellished. The international endowments of the faith, stretching from the base up to the summit of Mount Carmel, an area of over 350,000 square meters, had been acquired. A plot of land comprising approximately 36,000 square meters for the purpose of erecting a mashallah scar on Mount Carmel, located in close proximity to the spot hallowed by the footsteps of Baha'u'llah, near the time-honored cave of Elijah, and associated with the revelation of the Tablet of Carmel, the charter of the world's spiritual and administrative centers of the faith on that mountain, had finally, after tedious and prolonged negotiations, been purchased. At Bahji, the holiest spot in the Baha'i world, around the shrine of Baha'u'llah, within an area of approximately 160,000 square meters, beautiful gardens had been laid out, and within these gardens, where in the future a magnificent mausoleum over the shrine of Baha'u'llah would be constructed, an outer sanctuary termed the Harami Aqdas, designed to embrace this holy edifice, had been created. The realization of such magnificent achievements in the Holy Land during the opening years of the formative age of the faith, together with the detailed delineation of the blueprint for the building of the World Center of the Faith, setting the pattern for its future development, will always be regarded as one of the noblest fruits associated with the ministry of Shoghi Effendi. The triumphant conclusion of the 10-year crusade, together with the termination of the interim period of the custodianship of the hands of the cause, marks on the one hand the closing of an epoch in the formative age, and on the other the opening of a new one with the birth of the Universal House of Justice, an institution divinely ordained, infallibly guided by Baha'u'llah and the Bab, whose establishment had been anticipated by the ancient beauty in the Tablet of Carmel as the sailing of the Ark of God, and whose functions have been clearly defined by him in several tablets. The Universal House of Justice has been described by the Master as the source of all good and freed from error, and referred to by the Guardian as the apex of the Baha'i administrative order, the supreme organ of the Baha'i Commonwealth, and the last refuge of a tottering civilization. In language most emphatic and clear, Abdul Baha has, in the following passage, confirmed the authority of the Universal House of Justice. Unto the most holy book every one must turn. All that is not expressly recorded therein must be referred to the Universal House of Justice. That which this body, whether unanimously or by a majority, doth carry, that is verily the truth and purpose of God himself. Whoso doth deviate therefrom is verily of them that love discord, hath shown forth malice, and turned away from the Lord of the covenant. And again, all must seek guidance and turn unto the center of the cause and the house of justice. And he that turneth unto whatsoever else is indeed in grievous error. With the establishment of the Universal House of Justice, the last and crowning edifice in the structure of the administrative order of Baha'u'llah, had come into being, and the outpouring of divine guidance had been restored. As we survey the history of the faith from the time of the passing of Shohreh Effendi up to the birth of the Universal House of Justice, a period fraught with many dangers and uncertainties, we can clearly see that only through the power of the covenant had the Baha'i community preserved its unity and solidarity. Although scattered throughout the world and having different backgrounds, customs, and languages, the mass of the believers remained steadfast in the covenant and turned to the center of the cause of God, the universal house of justice. Indeed, all that is contained within the will and testament of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, as far as the individual believer is concerned, can be condensed into one key word, and upon this word depends not only the spiritual life and the salvation of the individual, but also the unity of the Baha'i community. This word is to turn. Baha'u'llah enjoined upon his followers to turn to Abdul Baha after his ascension. Abdul Baha did likewise by directing them to turn to Shobi Effendi and the Universal House of Justice, with a devotion and loyalty reminiscent of the early days of the guardianship, when the steadfast Baha'is rallied around Shobi Effendi. The believers all over the world turned in this day to the Universal House of Justice. The wonderful messages of that august body, which began soon after its formation to pour out from the world center, inspired the whole Baha'i world and evoked feelings of joy and gratitude in the hearts of the believers, who were then witnessing the power, the authority, and the unerring guidance with which that supreme institution was fully invested. The old order can be likened to an old house, inside whose walls mankind for centuries had been sheltered, and within whose many parts nations of the world had lived in comparative isolation until the coming of Baha'u'llah, when a new life was breathed into all created things, and a new era dawned upon humanity. In his tablets, Baha'u'llah, in unmistakable terms, proclaimed to the peoples of the world, "Soon will the present day order be rolled up, and a new one spread out in its stead." He warned them that the old house was no longer going to provide a safe shelter for mankind, and that before long it would fall apart. He called on the peoples of the world to come out of the old house and under his guidance begin the building of a new one. This clarion call of Baha'u'llah's fell on deaf ears. Only a handful from among his own countrymen at first recognized him as the Redeemer of mankind and the architect of a new house. This new world order, these left the old house and came out to prepare the way for the building of a new one. The first and most important part of any building is the laying of its foundations, and the initial step here is that of excavation. This is a stage in which everything is being pulled down instead of raised up, and the work does not seem to be constructive. In the early days of the faith, therefore, the outside world failed to appreciate the glorious work performed by a small band of heroic souls who labored with matchless heroism and self sacrifice in order to prepare the way for the building of a new house, this world encircling order. This was a period of persecution and martyrdom, a period during which, in the terms of our analogy, storms of dust were raised by the process of excavating the foundations of the new house, and humanity as a whole looked upon it as a useless operation. Indeed, the stories of heroism and martyrdom reached the people of the East and the West, and yet the generality of mankind, the inhabitants of the old house, busied with their own affairs and deprived of spiritual vision, saw nothing of the glory and greatness of those 77 years which marked the duration of the heroic age, and prepared the way for the laying of the foundations of the new world order of Baha'u'llah at a later period. With the advent of the formative age in 1921, the time for the actual building of the new house had at last come. The Baha'is of the world, under the guidance of the beloved guardian Shogh Effendi, had begun the task of laying its foundations. After 50 years of dedicated service of toil and labor on the part of the builders of Baha'u'llah's world order, the form and pattern of the new house, which is destined to shelter in the fullness of time the whole of the human race within its walls, is gradually emerging from amidst the ruins of the old order, attracting to itself each day in ever increasing numbers men from all walks of life who have been disenchanted with the old house. The others who constitute the majority of mankind are, alas, in the words of Baha'u'llah, bereft of discernment to see God with their own eyes or hear his melody with their own ears. Fettered by age-long traditions and bound within the clutches of an ailing order, the inhabitants of the old house have their vision obscured by many veils which are placed before their eyes. Such veils as those of materialism and prejudice, of pride and vainglory, prevent them from seeing the grandeur and the beauty of the new house, majestically rising amidst the chaos of a divided world. Today, the forces of destruction are sweeping the face of the earth, and the old house is increasingly being shaken to its very foundations. Within it, mankind, agonized and confused, is struggling hopelessly to mend a structure which is rapidly disintegrating and which is completely beyond repair. The world is in travail, wrote Baha'u'llah almost 100 years ago, and its agitation waxeth day by day. Its face is turned towards waywardness and unbelief. Such shall be its plight, that to disclose it now would not be meet and seemly. Its perversity will long continue, and when the appointed hour is come, there shall suddenly appear that which shall cause the limbs of mankind to quake. Then and only then will the divine standard be unfurled, and the nightingale of paradise warble its melody. The followers of Baha'u'llah, having realized that the old house is not repairable and that it will eventually fall apart. Labor in every land with the utmost dedication and the sense of extreme urgency in the building of the new house. Although anxious to give a helping hand to the unfortunate and the downtrodden, and eager to alleviate the misery and suffering of their fellow men in the old house, Baha'is are nevertheless conscious that the old order is doomed to failure, and that such assistance will be only of a very limited value, and will not in the end solve the problems of mankind. They clearly see that when the world is suffering from so many ills, their only task is the revivification of its peoples and the complete reorientation of human society. Like men who go to work every day and return home at night, the followers of Baha'u'llah spend all their energies in the building of the new house. They only sleep, as it were, in the old house, and do not therefore participate with its inhabitants in the formulation of policies connected with it. Baha'is remain loyal to their respective governments and do not take part or interfere in the political activities of any state or nation in the world. Only in this way can they remain faithful to the mission entrusted to them by Baha'u'llah, a mission which is to build in the formative age a new world order for mankind. Great indeed is the spectacle which appears before us. A cursory review of the history of the cause will demonstrate that a faith which had been oppressed in the land of its birth from its very inception had sustained a most grievous blow in the martyrdom of its herald, had suffered the unbearable tribulations heaped upon its author, had witnessed the martyrdom of no less than 20,000 of its adherents, and which was, as anticipated by Nasruddin Shah, its royal adversary, to have its very name obliterated from the pages of history, has acquired during the first 50 years of the formative age such vitality and strength, and made such phenomenal progress as to astonish its own avowed adherents as well as its enemies. The light of the faith which was ignited in the Sial of Tehran, whose brilliance was fully manifested in Adrianople, whose rays illumined parts of the American, the European, and the Australian continents during the ministry of the Master, has, during the early period of the formative age, systematically been diffused to almost 50,000 localities in the world. The army of light, consisting of pioneers, teachers, and administrators, recruited from every race, class, and color, proclaiming to mankind the advent of the Lord of hosts, has encircled the globe. The faith of Baha'u'llah has reached almost every stratum of human society. Its fundamental verities, its history, its teachings, its transforming power, and its aim and purpose have been and are being increasingly brought to the attention of a tormented humanity. The rising institutions of its divinely guided administrative order have been established, and within its world center, in the vicinity of its holy shrines, the crowning edifice of that same order, the universal house of justice, which will, in the fullness of time, unveil to mankind its glorious station, and manifest the sovereignty of Baha'u'llah has been majestically erected. The winning of such memorable victories for the cause within so short a period, foreshadowing the advent of much greater achievements in the future, is due primarily to the rise of the administrative order, whose significance the beloved guardian Shaykh Effendi has extolled in these words: Let no one, while this system is still in its infancy, misconceive its character, belittle its significance, or misrepresent its purpose. The bedrock on which this administrative order is founded is God's immutable purpose for mankind in this day. The source from which it derives its inspiration is no less than Baha'u'llah himself. Its shield and defender are the embattled hosts of the Abha kingdom. Its seed is the blood of no less than 20,000 martyrs who have offered up their lives that it may be born and flourish. The axis round which its institutions revolve are the authentic provisions of the will and testament of Abdul Baha. Its guiding principles are the truths which he who is the unerring interpreter of the teachings of our faith has so clearly enunciated in his public addresses throughout the West. The laws that govern its operation and limit its functions are those which have been expressly ordained in the Kitab al-Aqdas, the seat around which its spiritual, its humanitarian, and administrative activities will cluster are the Mashal Askar and its dependencies. The pillars that sustain its authority and buttress its structure are the twin institutions of the guardianship and of the Universal House of Justice. The underlying aim which animates it is the establishment of the New World Order, as adumbrated by Baha'u'llah. The methods it employs, the standard it inculcates, incline it to neither East nor West, neither Jew nor Gentile, neither rich nor poor, neither white nor colored. Its watchword is the unification of the human race. Its standard, the most great peace. Its consummation, the advent of that golden millennium, the day when the kingdoms of this world shall have become the kingdom of God himself, the kingdom of Baha'u'llah.